Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar today. My name is Dan Doolin with Integrity Data, and today is our fourth webinar in our summer educational series, and today's webinar is entitled Ways to Save Mucho Time in Dynamics GP Payroll Processing, Tips and Tricks. So I've come up with a lot of tips and tricks and things that I get asked about a lot to share with you today, and so we're going to walk through those over the course of the next 45 minutes. Today's webinar is recorded, so if there's a part that you miss or a part that you want to see again or show to your friends, you can certainly access the webinar recording at a later date. Let's go ahead and get started. We've got a lot of things to cover today, so we're going to jump right into it. Quick agenda, just a quick overview about who Integrity Data is if you're not familiar with us. And then we're going to jump into the things that I get asked about. When we do a tips and tricks webinar or a session at Convergence or something like that, the way I come up with the topics is I just go back and think about what do Dynamics GP Payroll customers and the partners we work with, what do they ask me about, or what are the questions that they come to me with. And so that's kind of where I start. And then I go into some other things you should be asking about, so things that you may not be aware of that you might want to check into that would be useful. So hopefully all the information is useful. I'm going to share some information about the other educational webinars that we've done in the last few weeks, and we'll have the links for those. And we'll also send you the links in the follow-up email as well. So don't feel like you got to scribble those down real quick when we go through the slide. We'll have some additional information for you also, and then Q&A. Obviously, 90% of our time is going to be spent in those second and third bullets, things I get asked about and things you should ask about or might want to ask about. Just a little bit about Integrity Data. We're located in central Illinois, Lincoln, Illinois, which is right in the center of the state. Our total team is about 20 employees or 20 team members. We've been a Microsoft Dynamics GP partner since 1996. And of course, we've been providing enhancement solutions to GP customers since 2000. Most of those have been around the payroll and human resources areas of Dynamics GP. In addition to the products, we also provide development and consulting services, so custom development as well as payroll implementation, implementation of our products. We do some SharePoint work also. We're a Microsoft Dynamics Development Center, which means that we have done some work for Microsoft on the core product being Dynamics GP, and we work very closely with Microsoft and try to encourage them to put in new features that help streamline the payroll process. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, and we still provide those as products to you all so that you can have a more efficient operation. We're the original authors of Advanced Payroll, Advanced Human Resources, PTO Manager, Benefit Self-Service, and some core payroll extensions, some additional pieces in payroll that you see, and a couple of those we're going to talk about today. That's sort of the GP 10, GP 2010 naming conventions, and if you're on GP 2013, those pieces are all rolled into the HR Payroll Extended Pack that you can add on top of your starter pack within Dynamics GP 2013 licensing structure. Okay, so that's just a little bit about Integrity Data. Don't want to take up too much time there. The next thing that I want to do is we're going to start you with our first poll question of the day. We're going to have 2, maybe 3 of these throughout the webinar. The first one's very easy. Think of it as your pre-test in your summer school class. Let me go ahead and launch the first poll. We'll just leave it open for about a minute or so. And I'm going to launch that. My company currently processes payroll in Dynamics GP, or cut your checks through Dynamics GP. Thinking about processing payroll in Dynamics GP. So maybe you use Dynamics GP for financials, but you're thinking about utilizing the payroll component, maybe because it's included with your 2013 license, or your payroll is outsourced, and that will continue to be the case, but you just wanted to take advantage of the opportunity to learn something today. So take just about 20 more seconds, and if you can, and answer the poll question. Okay, great, good job. And thanks for responding to those. We'll have a couple more towards the end of the webinar today. Let's go ahead and close the poll. Go back to our slide deck. We're just going to spend a little bit of time in PowerPoint and then get to the good stuff. I don't like to beat you down with slides, but here are things that I get asked about frequently. And so those are the things that I want to start with. And I probably have more content than what we have time for today, but so some of these will fly through. Some of them we'll spend a little bit more time on. So things that I get frequently asked about, and these are really not in any specific order, but I get asked a lot about overtime rates and an integrity data product for overtime rates, so we're going to clarify that situation. Employee payroll cost allocations, obviously with payroll being typically the largest costs that an organization has, getting those costs allocated correctly by department, position, etc. is very important. So we're going to talk about a couple ways to do that. Another common question, why can't I do a negative transaction? And so we're going to talk through some options for doing that as well. Alerts, notifications, workflow for payroll HR is a big one. And then different ways to accrue leave in Dynamics GP, so vacation, sick time, PTO, jury duty. We're going to steer clear of FMLA for right now, but just all those different ways to accrue leave. There's 4 options for doing that. I'm still surprised at the number of customers that still do that in Excel. Maybe it's just because it's easier for you. Other times it's because they're just not aware of the options, so we're here to share the options. Being able to attach employee documents to employee records. It's a new feature in Dynamics GP 2013 R2, so I'm going to show you that really quick. We get asked a lot about calculating retirement match, a tiered matching component for benefit plans, 401ks, and so on. And then also situations that come up a lot with a combined contribution limit with a 401k and a Roth 401k is a good example of that. So we're gonna talk through how to do that. In addition to those, things you should be asking about. So these are things that you may not be aware of that I want to make sure that you are aware of because they're big time savers. So one is payroll posting report previews. So being able to see your posting reports for payroll when you calculate checks, so before you print checks. Gross up calculations and what if scenarios. If you're running the same report for the same person over and over, it's time to look at Excel-based reports so that person can just click on their desktop and view that information very quickly whenever they want without you having to do it for them. Another thing to maybe think about is emailing earnings statements to employees. It's a feature that we offer, and a few of these are going to be related to some features that we do offer as integrity data products. But if you're still printing, stuffing, and mailing those earnings statements to employees that are on direct deposit, it's time to take a look at something to resolve that for you. There's a product that we have. There's a couple of portal options that you can look at. The return on investment on any of those solutions is typically measured in months because it's so much of a better use of your time than printing, stuffing, and sending those earnings statements. And employee self-service, but business portal is going away if you've heard that. We'll talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to actually divert you there to a webinar that we did about 2013 R2 features that is recorded so you can see that in its entirety versus taking a bunch of time here to talk about it today. Those are the topic areas that I want to cover. I'm going to try to keep it organized as I go through it in a demonstration. So up next, where we're going to spend a good part of our time, is a demo of some of those areas. I'm going to try to keep it organized so you can kind of keep track of what we're talking about, and then we'll come back to the slides and we'll recap those topic areas and with some notes about what we covered today so you can see those, take screenshots of them, and of course the recording will be available also. Okay. With that, let's jump over to a demo. And I'm going to cheat and use some of the PowerPoint notes so that I can keep us somewhat organized. All right, the things that I get asked about frequently, we go back to that list, and it starts with overtime rates. And recently I've been on a couple calls with some customers, and overtime rates are important. You can really get in trouble with Department of Labor if you're not calculating overtime rates correctly, and specifically when you need to blend that rate for Fair Labor Standards Act compliance. So an employee has bonus time or bonus pay. They got multiple pay rates from different pay codes, and there's functionality in core payroll that lets you do this. Lets you do this calculation. So I'm going to show you a couple screens, and we do have an example that we're going to walk through as we sum some of this up a little bit later. So I'm in Dynamics GP 2013 R2. It might look a little bit different to you. I'm trying to be a good boy and use the area pages instead of the icons across the top. I will digress and go up there and use the old menu structure. But what we're going to do is we're going to set up payroll and then overtime methods. Okay, and I've got a really fancy one here called OT for overtime. And it's just what this is a way for you to configure your calculation of how you want Dynamics GP to determine what the average wage for an employee should be in a specific pay period. So you set this up and it calculates it on the fly. This is a very simple example. You can see I've got the hourly pay code here, so we're going to use the dollars and the hours from the hourly pay code, and we're going to use the dollars from a bonus pay code if it's involved in the pay period, and it's going to average those together to determine what the employee's average rate of pay is per hour for that pay period. And then we're going to multiply it times a factor of 1.5. Okay, so this is a blended overtime rate calculation. It's going to determine the overtime rate on the fly based on this calculation and based on the transaction data for that employee in that specific pay period. We get into this is the most simplest example that you can come up with here, but we get into a lot of situations where there's shift codes, shift differentials set up as pay codes. There's other types of pay that are, other pay codes that have different rates of pay, bonuses, that sort of thing, that really make this a complex calculation. And you can manipulate this a couple different ways based on how your time's coming in, based on how you want the hours to show up, based on how you've done it in the past, so it's not confusing to the employee on the pay stub. But this is the heart of where you set up that calculation. Okay, so setting up the overtime method at the setup level. For the specific employee, if you go to their overtime pay code, so we're going to pick on Adam Barr, go to his overtime pay code. The way that you assign that to the pay code is through the Go To button. So you'll notice here that Adam's base pay rate is $18 per hour, and his factor is 0, so his overtime pay rate is set to 0 at the moment, which is because we're going to calculate it on the fly. So if we go to the pay code options, we've got the calculation method set to OT, which was a calculation method we were just looking at. So when you go through the build process, it's going to look at this calculation and determine that what the blended overtime rate should be for that employee all on the fly. Now, for clarification, this is part of core payroll extensions, which were added to Dynamics GP, actually version 9, right before version 10 came out, as part of an OEM agreement with Integrity Data and Microsoft. So this is part of your core payroll solution that you have today. Sometimes there's confusion that it's still an Integrity Data product. And it doesn't really help that we have another product called Overtime Hours Rules. And that product is specifically designed to determine how many overtime hours an employee should have. So I'm not going to get into that today, but there's two separate pieces. One is determining the hours, which is something that Integrity Data provides. The other is doing the blended rate calculation, which is something that's already part of your payroll solution today. All right. As we go through the webinar today, if you have questions, there's a lot of people on this webinar today, so if you have questions, go ahead and type those into the question box. I'll do my best to keep an eye on it during the webinar, And so if a question comes up, I'll try to get to it. Otherwise, we'll catch those at the end. Okay, so we've just talked about a little bit about overtime rates. You can do blended rate capabilities in Dynamics GP today as part of that rate capability. That's part of your core payroll solution. It's just a little bit of an overview of that. And I have an example of a payroll transactions in a batch. We're going to process those a little bit later in the presentation. Another big one that we get asked about is employee payroll cost allocations. So getting expenses into the right place, into the right general ledger account. Accounting people care a lot about that. Department managers care a lot about that. CFOs care a lot about that. Shareholders can care a lot about that. It's pretty important. So we want to make sure that we get that right. Two ways to do that. As part of that extended pack or advanced payroll functionality, if we go into the card section and look at a specific employee, there's this capability called transaction auto split. Okay, and again, that's part of advanced payroll. If I pull up Pilar Ackerman, okay, and I think she's in the CSP position, you will see that as that employee works in this position, her cost can be split across multiple departments, 50-50. Okay, so you could have a couple different position codes for this employee. So if they work in that position, then it's going to split their costs to multiple departments. What it does, it actually creates multiple transactions. So Pilar Ackerman's a salaried employee. We're splitting her costs across two departments in this case automatically. And what it does is create those two transactions and then utilizes the payroll posting account setup to determine, okay, now I've got a transaction for the installation department and I've got a transaction for support services. And based on your payroll posting account setup configuration, then that will determine what GL account the costs and other subsequent payroll costs, expenses, and so on would go to in your general ledger. So sometimes people are using allocation accounts for distributing these costs to multiple departments. The primary issue with that is that your financial data and your payroll data don't match up at that point. So by using either this transaction auto split capability that's in advanced payroll or the HRP extended pack if you're on GP 2013, or the next tool that I'm going to show you, the primary advantage is that the payroll data, so department reports, position reports, pay code reports, are going to match up with how that data got posted. So everything is together. If you just use the allocation accounts, you're never going to be able to reconcile that back between what got posted to an account and then the payroll transactions. Okay, so transaction auto split's one way to do it. An additional capability for doing that is a tool that Integrity Data offers called Employee Counts and Splits. So if I go to Employee Split Maintenance, look at the same employee, and you can have multiple split codes here. And I did essentially the same thing, but I have multiple positions. What this does is gives you more capabilities and lets you do more complex splitting things. So you can have multiple splits per employee. You can get very detailed on how you configure those versus just based on position. You can split to specified account numbers versus depending on the payroll posting account setup. So you can get, this can get very detailed, it can get very ugly, it can get very complex. But when you have those exceptions and those employees that have those complex posting requirements, you need a good way to do that, and this delivers that. This also provides you with the capability to enter a general ledger account number directly on the payroll transaction entry window. So allocations accounts can work in Dynamics GP. I'm not a big fan because the data is then out of sync. You can use a transaction auto split, which is part of advanced payroll. Works great. A feature we developed a long time ago as part of that OEM agreement that I mentioned earlier. Works well, a little bit simpler as far as requirements that it can handle. And then you have the auto split capability. The overarching takeaway from this is that there are ways in Dynamics GP Payroll to accommodate those requirements if you have those. So if you're spending a lot of time going back, doing manual adjustments to your general ledger accounts, trying to get costs moved around in the right direction. There's a better way to do it, and I've just given you 3 options for doing that. Okay, I hope that helps. Let's go on beyond the payroll cost allocations into negative transactions. Now, the reason for doing negative transactions, and I know all of you are probably familiar with this, is that there are times when employees or other employees responsible for entering time do make mistakes. I know that sometimes that's a tough sell, but sometimes those mistakes do happen, and that's a joke. So you can laugh if you wish. What that does is produces a requirement on you to go in and make that correction. So payroll got allocated to the wrong department. Payroll got allocated to the wrong pay code. Somebody took vacation time and didn't record it. Somebody recorded vacation time and didn't take it. All of those things require you to make some kind of adjustment so that the allocations are correct. We just talked about that. And that your historical reporting for payroll is correct and PTO balances are correct and all of those things. So now, right now, the way that that's done typically is by going through transactions, payroll, and then manual checks. Lost it there for a second. Okay, so you can, I'm going to pull up a batch here. It's got a couple transactions in it. You can do these transactions, go in and put in a specific employee ID, do a transaction. Let's see, let's back into another transaction here. Okay. All right, it's not going to show me the other transaction. Okay, let's do a new one. So you can pick your pay code, which would be hour. All right, I got to back up a little bit further. Okay, let's choose Adam Bar. All right, I'm going to run into all kinds of situations I get myself into here. A transaction, there we go. And code, let's do hour. And you can do negative hour transactions here. If you wanted to do, minus 8 hours, you could do that and go through that process and make those corrections here through the manual check process. A couple of issues with that. Number one, as I just demonstrated by accident, is that sometimes it's a little bit tricky to do. And also it takes time. It's somewhere in the neighborhood of a 15 to 20 step process to do this and to get these things corrected for an employee. Negative deductions get even worse because you've got to have a manual check to pay the employee, or you've got to have a payroll transaction to give the employee back the money that you've deducted, and then you've got to come in here and do a negative for that pay code that you used to give them the money, and then you've got to do a negative for the deduction itself to get that corrected. So we get a lot of requests and a lot of questions about this. And so there is a way to do it in Dynamics GP. If you're struggling with this as far as getting it corrected, there's a way to do it in Dynamics GP. We get a lot of questions about this, and so we developed a better way to do it in Dynamics GP. And I'm going to show you that real quick. Okay. I'm going to go into payroll transaction entry. Okay, and I've got my payroll batch here all ready to go. So you can see here I've got some hours for Adam, and I've got a bonus for Adam, which we're going to see in our blended rate calculation. Now, if I want to do a negative hour or negative payroll transaction here, this is a product called Negative Payroll Transactions. Very creative with the name that we provide. There's 2 products: negative payroll transactions and negative deductions. 2 separate products. I'm going to show you those today so that you can see how easy you can make this on yourselves. Adam Bar, pay code, vacation. Let's just assume that that was not entered correctly, so we're going to back that back out. And all I'm going to do here on my keyboard is going to minus 8 hours. Okay, it's part of a regular payroll batch. That's all I need to do with it. Pretty simple. It doesn't get much easier than that. Okay, so that's the Mucho time part of the title of the webinar today. Negative deduction is almost as easy. Okay, I'm going to change my type here to deduction. Now normally you'd either have to do the process I described earlier, or you'd have to set the deduction to be a transaction required deduction, go and do this, go back and remember to change it back. You can only do a negative deduction if you've got other pay. The negative deduction product that we offer lets you do that whenever you want. And I'm going to put in this insurance deduction. It recognizes the fact I've entered a deduction code, and it's $12, which I can change. We get a window that pops up here that is a conversion window that's based on the setup of this particular product that automatically maps this over to this pay code to actually pay the employee. And it's mapped to that pay code because of the tax settings related to this deduction. So insurance is a pre-tax deduction. Insurance ND for negative deduction is a taxable pay code that's used to pay the employee back that deduction that we over withheld. So I'm just agreeing to the mapping. I say OK, and we're on our way. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go through a couple things here and go through the build and the calculate process so you can see some of these things actually functioning. Okay, so we're going to do build checks. Select our batch. Okay, we're going to go ahead and build this. Negative deduction report, we're going to cancel that. Build check, we're going to look at that on the screen. Okay, obviously it's very easy with just one employee in the pay run. But you'll see a couple things here. One is that you'll see the bonus pay here. Okay, and then so I thought we'd have overtime in here. I must not have had that turned on, but here's our negative deduction, and then here's our negative hours also. So I thought we would see the blending there. I must have turned off the overtime rules, but we would see a blended rate calculation there. It come out to be, I think it was $27 by the time you figure the $17.75, and then the add in the $50 bonus, divide by the number of hours, and that would give you your average wage, multiply it times 1.5, and you're there. Let the system do it for you versus you manually calculating that overtime rate. Okay, so here's the negative vacation hours and the negative deduction. If we continue through the calculate process, we'll see all those things continue. Okay, we'll look at this on the screen. Now you'll notice I start getting some posting reports as part of the calculate process. So I've got the check posting register before I'm printing checks. This is one of those things that I put under the category of things you should ask about or things you should know about so that you can look at this before you're printing your check so you can make sure that everything is correct. Let's look at this one. Okay, so here's our calculate report. Okay, what we'd expect to see. Here's our pre-posting reports. Okay, so it shows all the accounts except for cash that are being impacted by this employee. Okay, another distribution report, and so on. So I'm going to show you where to set those up, those pre-posting reports. If we go into reports, let's see, company. So I got to remember where to do this now. I'm probably not going to remember now. Okay, I'm going to skip that part because I would find it in the next couple of clicks, but essentially you go into where you set up all of your posting reports, and you'll see those identified as PPR there. So those are your pre-posting reports for payroll. Okay, so make sure you set those up. Those are very handy. Lets you make sure that your posting is correct before you before you actually print the checks. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next area, which is alerts, notification, and workflow. A lot of times what gets used for some notifications are GP business alerts, which have been around for a long time, and to be honest, it kind of shows. They work okay, but they're very static and not very dynamic. So there's a couple of other options. You can try to use the business alerts. So if you're not aware of that, that does exist in Dynamics GP. There are some SQL alerts at the database level that you can utilize. And then also you can utilize a product that Integrity Data offers called ULink, which is a notification and workflow tool. So just real quick, I got a couple of emails to show you here. This is just a notification from ULink that a pay code has changed. This is just one way that it's used in the payroll arena. Another example just showing that employee license has expired, okay, or a certification or anything like that. Notifying the supervisor, notifying human resources. It's very dynamic in the fact that it can pull all the data from Dynamics GP and then send it to whoever needs to. This even can be used for external communication to vendors, benefit providers, whoever else. If something changes for that employee, you could notify others. Another example where I've seen this used is a confirmation email going to an employee that direct deposit changes have taken effect, just for security's sake. And then another way that it can be used, more of an approval, is PTO requests. Okay, so that's just a quick look at some notification capabilities that do exist. Again, just want to let you know what's out there, so if it's something you're thinking about or been thinking about or would like to explore further, you know what the options are. And again, when we get back to the slides, we'll have some summary information on these to show you. All right. Let's go back and talk about some things that you should be asking about, some additional things. We talked about the payroll posting reports already. Another one that is interesting is I think it's becoming more common that people aren't aware of is gross up capabilities. When we look in Dynamics GP, there is a capability to accommodate gross ups, but it's very, very limited. So if I go to utilities, tools, utilities, payroll, there's a gross up calculation. And so if you want to get a $150 check for an employee, it'll figure FICA and that's about it. The rest of the stuff you've got to put in there, and you hit the calculate button. Very, very limited. I would suggest if you're going to do this, you might as well use Excel, and it'd probably be a little bit easier even. One tool that we offer for doing gross ups and also for what if scenarios for employees is a tool called Paycheck What If Calculator. And if I go into tools, utilities, payroll, actually let me start somewhere else here. Let me go to the employee card. Let's pick on Adam Barr again. This is a lot better way to navigate. Hit the drop down or the go to button, payroll, Paycheck What If Calculator. Again, this is a tool that Integrity Data provides, but you can see very easily I've got Adam's information here. If I want to do what if or modeling questions with Adam, I can certainly go ahead and process those. For example, change his tax exemptions, hit the calculate button. It would bring up the pre-check report. I can also do gross up calculations here based on his specific data. Bonus, if I need to give him a $500 check. Okay, and put in the amount, and then hit gross up, and then do the calculate. It will tell me exactly what his gross pay would need to be based on all of his information. I don't have to hand calculate the taxes or anything like that. If deductions need to be in there, then they can be. And then all I have to do once I get that complete is add to the batch, and I'll add it to an existing payroll batch. So very quick and easy to do both gross ups and also those what if scenarios. In GP 2013 R2, the capability exists for you to deploy this capability to an employee in a self-service type of way through a web client user. And there's more about that in a webinar that we did a couple of weeks ago that describes that whole process and that whole capability. So again, gross up capabilities and what-if scenarios, very easily accommodated, but that is a tool that Integrity Data provides. Okay, let's take a look at a couple other things here that we need to look at. Rerunning the same report for the same person. Very easily accommodated. You're probably familiar with SmartList, but a lot of people are not familiar with Excel reports, Excel-based reports. I'm just going to go into the Excel report builder here, and I'm going to pull up one that's already there called Leave Balances. Looks just like a SmartList, but what you can do is you can deploy that out and publish it out to somebody in the organization to have on their desktop. So this is just a Excel report or an Excel report that shows employee leave information. So I created this in about 5 or 10 minutes. Granted, I knew where the data was. I've got 2 tables connected here. Very easy to do. I published it. Now, the way that a user would access that, let's just say it's a manager out there that doesn't have access to Dynamics GP. They've got this Excel icon on their desktop. They can double click on it. It shows up. It refreshes the data every time they open it. So if we look at Adam Barr down here, I've got this sorted in a pivot table. So department, position, employee, and all of Adam's leave balances. And this is referencing data from the Integrity Data Comprehensive Leave Manager product, which if you watch the ways to accrue time, you'll see more information about that. So here's all of his all of his codes and balances associated with those. It's also very easy to tie the rate to this and come up with a liability report. We ship some Excel reports with some of our products, some Excel-based reports, so you have those. This is a great way to deploy information out to people that, good or bad, maybe they ask you for the same information over and over, so it's just an easy way for them to get that information quickly. Or think about adding a chart to this so that the CFO or CEO or an executive in your organization can quickly open the Excel file. The data could be there, but also the chart so that they can have that readily available to them. A lot of great things that you can do with this. Okay, so that's a great tool, and hopefully something that's useful for you. We talked about the earnings statements. Just real quick here, I'll open up an example of an employee getting their earnings statement via email using Integrity Data's employee email suite. Put in the password. Oops, this one's different. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Password protected PDF attachment. Get the earnings statement. There you can see some negative payroll transactions in there as well. We'll make this a little bit smaller. But again, the moral of that story is that there's much better ways to deliver earnings statements than printing, stuffing, and distributing those either through mail or interoffice mail or bulk mail or anything like that. There's a Green Shades has an online portal. There's Business Portal, and there's our employee email suite product that will email these out directly out of Dynamics GP. Okay. Employee self-service is a sort of a hot topic at the moment. If you were at Convergence or if you've been on any webinars, Microsoft made the announcement that, well, Business Portal, which is the self-service delivery model right now, is going away. And they kind of left it at that, which was, my personal opinion is it was not very good messaging, because what they're really doing, they didn't really give themselves enough credit. What they're doing is transitioning to a new model to deliver that Business Portal, or to deliver that self-service capability. So self-service would be, an employee being able to go in and look at their pay stubs, or a manager being able to go in and look at their direct report information. And so what Microsoft is doing is now delivering that through what they call the web client, which is accessing Dynamics GP through a browser. and they've added some things to Dynamics GP to enable that, specifically for self-service. So think about this. An employee can go to a site, log in, and what they see is a very, very, very limited version of Dynamics GP with just their employee-specific information in that browser. That's the new self-service model. It's going to give us so many more capabilities as Dynamics GP users to deploy things through that self-service capability through the web client. We did a whole webinar on this a couple weeks ago. It was called new features in GP 2013, but that's primarily what we covered. So let me go back to the slides here for just a minute and kind of do a quick recap of what we've covered. Okay, we did the demo. Things we get asked about, or I get asked about frequently, integrity data's product for calculating overtime rates. No, that's part of your core payroll solution that you have now. So overtime rate managers, core payroll extensions, overtime hours calculation is an integrity data product. Employee cost allocations, we talked about transaction auto split and employee accounts and splits from integrity data. Negative transactions, you can do that through manual checks, or you can use a negative payroll transactions product from us. There's also a negative deduction product as well. Business alerts, SQL alerts, and ULink for alerts, notification, and workflow. There's a lot of questions about workflow capabilities also in the new workflow in GP 2013 R2. And as you guessed, we did a whole webinar series on that as well, and I've got those webinar links on in a couple slides. Okay, other things, different ways to accrue leave. We did a webinar on that. There's 4 options: payroll accruals, which is very simple; PTO manager, which is part of that extended pack; HR attendance, and also integrity data comprehensive leave manager. It's a very robust tool for accruing and managing vacation, sick, and any other type of leave that you track for employees. We always bring that up because it's something that happens every pay period. So you always got to keep track of balances. There's always people taking time off, accruals, maximums. And so getting that automated is something that will save you Mucho time every pay period. So you've got a lot of options for doing that. The attach employee documents, that's a new feature in 2013 R2. Manually calculating retirement match or checking limits. Again, there's an integrity data product for that called Enhanced Retirement Plans. We talked about Affordable Care Act. There's the link to AIM Technologies. It's just aim-technologies.com. You want to look for ACA dashboard on their site. I think it's right in the center. You can get more information. Of course, you can contact them. Is that sort of coming back around, being able to track that information, look back, reporting periods, things like that? Everybody's response is always the same. It's kind of a guh. Nobody's really looking forward to it, but unless the thing completely goes away, it's something we're all going to have to do. Regardless of the size of your company, even if you're less than 50 employees, you're still going to have to track to report that you have less than 50 employees that be eligible. So check out the dashboard. I believe Atlantic Technologies has some kind of a report solution also. Might want to check them out as well. Posting reports, we talked about that. Oh, there's my link. I should have looked at the slide to set that up. Tools, setup, posting. That was close. Posting, setup, and your reports, you can click on those to remember all those to start with PPR or your pre-posting reports for payroll. What if and gross up calculations, we talked about that. Excel-based reports, employee email suite. There's also business portal and the Green Shades online product, their employee portal. And then the employee self-service, you can view that webinar recording to learn a lot about that. Speaking of, here's all the recordings. We'll send these out as part of the follow-up to the webinar today. We'll definitely make sure you have those links. So don't try to copy these down. We'll save you Mucho time by sending you the links. What I want to do now is go back, and I meant to show this just ahead of this slide, but I want to throw up another poll question for you. Let me grab that here and throw that up, and then I'm going to try to look at a question that's in the question box. So based on some of the things that I threw out there today for hopefully tips and tricks, how many of those did you find useful? Maybe you didn't know about them before, maybe you did but learned more. All of them, more than 5, between 3 and 5, 1 or 2 would be great, and or none of them. So this helps gauge whether we're on the right track as far as providing good content to you. Hopefully, even if it's just a few of them, you get good value out of the webinar. Let me look at the question in the question box here. See if I can answer that while you guys are answering the poll question. Ooh, there's a bunch of questions. Okay, I'm going to kind of start going through these here really quick. Actually, there's quite a few. Let me get through the end of the next couple of slides and have my contact information up, then I'll go through the questions. That way I can try to get through as much of the content as possible. Okay, a couple more seconds on the poll that's open, and then we'll go ahead and close that out. Okay. Back to the slide deck. So there's the other educational webinars we've done. Entire list of the integrity data payroll and HR solutions. I've talked about the email suite, negative payroll transactions. I meant to underline the ones that I referred to. So email suite we talked about, comprehensive leave manager we mentioned, negative deductions, U-Link, mid-pay period rate changes. That's also why you saw on the pay code we saw a pay rate of $18 for the employee, and then our payroll transaction is showing up at $17.75. There's a change in the rate there somewhere that wasn't kicking in yet. So overtime hours rules I mentioned, enhanced retirement plans, and a few others. So obviously our primary line of work has been to deliver features and functions that help you save time in payroll every week, or every time you're doing payroll. So some of you are probably already using some of these. If not, just want to make sure you're aware of the list so you know what's available to you. As always, you can visit integrity-data.com. You've done well in signing up for a webinar. We've got demos, case studies on our products. You can check the return on your investment. Always our product downloads are always there with release notes and also the documentation. We've added a knowledge base in the last 3 months. We've already got many articles there. So questions about releases, tips and tricks specific to our products, a lot of information there. And of course, you can follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. I'm going to go ahead and throw up my contact information here, and then I'm going to start answering questions. I want to say thanks for taking the time to join our webinar today. We hope that it was useful for you. That's the purpose of it, that you learned something and can take something back and apply it, whether it's looking at one of our tools or finding something in GP. I think the moral of the story is that there's always more out there than what you can see. I always learn new things about the product, even though I've been using it for 14 years. So GPUG webinars are great. We try to provide some helpful webinars. So hopefully it was a good use of your time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw up one last poll, and you can answer that, and then I'm going to start answering questions. So let me pull up the last poll here, just about overall that this webinar today was very helpful for you too, or a good use of your time, or maybe not so much. But just let us know so that we can make sure we're delivering good content to you. And I'm going to start answering some questions here because I've got a pretty good stack. Okay, first question. Why does GP refuse to put negative payroll transactions into the core product? I don't know the answer to that. So I guess and one of the reasons is probably because they know that we deliver that. And then somebody commented on the overtime that I lost the OT when I entered the negative 8 hours on the to get the overtime. You are correct. I did have that set at 80 hours. In my examples before, I had done -4 hours, which still produced the minus or 4 hours of overtime. So thanks for helping me out there. I appreciate that. The negative deduction value is not shown as a negative in the build. And that's a good point, and it's a good clarification. The reason for that is that when we're doing that payroll transaction, remember we're doing that negative deduction, we're giving that money back to the employee. So it needs to show up as a positive there. So that $12 was positive going back to the employee. What that product then does is automatically creates those manual check transactions in the background to reduce to do a negative transaction for that payroll, that pay code, and do the negative transaction for the deduction. So you are correct in that you did see a positive there, but that is what we expect to see, and that is how that should function. If you have more questions about that, feel free to contact me. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll so you can see my contact information here on the slide, and I want to keep answering questions. Okay, system posting. Somebody's trying to help me find the payroll posting report set up there. Appreciate that. So here's another question. I have an employee that we had to reverse the paycheck. I need to reverse the entire paycheck, and there'd be no further payments to the employee. I'm not sure if a void would help there, to go back and void the check, or if you need to back out other parts of it. Sounds like a relatively complex situation. Feel free to contact me after the webinar, and we'll do our best to try to help you through that. Here's a Ulink question. Can you use Ulink to send notification from third-party products, i.e. PTO requests and time matrix? Good question. Ulink is a tool that drives off the SQL database. So you can configure Ulink to work off of any third-party product that is SQL-based. So the answer to your question is that yes, you could use Ulink to send that PTO request from time matrix. There's also a component to time matrix that Dan Decker has done that will show the leave balances coming from Comprehensive Leave Manager. So if you're using Comprehensive and Leave Manager and Time Matrix together, then you can see those balances, or employees can see those balances in Time Matrix. Okay. So I'll try to go back through and answer these questions and type those in and send those. But if anybody has any other further questions, please feel free to ask those. Feel free to reach out to myself, or if you're familiar with Keith Schmidt, who is 2 to the right of me there in the picture lineup. He's the other account manager here at Integrity Data. Feel free to contact us with any questions. Our support team is always here to help as well if you're using any of our products. That's Julie and Mike that are on our support team. They're fantastic at what they do. I use them frequently to answer questions for myself. So thanks again for joining us. Again, this webinar will be recorded and will be available, and we'll send out as much information as possible in the follow-ups so that you have that and don't have to go searching for it. Again, thanks again, and we appreciate your time today, and we hope to see you again in the future, either on another webinar or at GPUG coming up in St. Louis or at Convergence. Thanks again, everyone.